Hello and welcome to this recorded press briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I'm Jonathan Beck, Director of Content. Unusually, this is not a live webinar, but a pre-recorded session. I'll be speaking with Oded Ailam, former head of the Counter-Terrorism Unit in the Mossad. Ailam is also a researcher at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, the JCFA, and is an author and screenwriter. Hello, Oded, and thank you for joining us on such short notice. What can you tell us about this, on the sirens we heard this morning?
First of all, we have to understand that the Iranians were walking on a very thin line regarding their approach to the Americans. Their assumption was that once they submit some sort of concessions that will enable Trump to say, yeah, this is a better deal than the 2015, which I withdrew from here, Trump administration will accept it, since they were assuming that Trump doesn't want to go into any sort of conflict or military conflict. His advisors are not so keen about it. Of course, the neighboring countries. And so their assumption was that they will be able to convince Trump to some sort of a deal, an intermediate deal, that he'll be able to swallow. But that is not a case. And they managed these negotiations, I must say, very poorly, because they did not anticipate that their concession will not be enough. And thus, Trump and his administration, of course, together with Israel, had decided not to wait until next week for the resuming of the next round of talks and strike immediately. Now, regarding the strike itself, first of all, I've heard a lot of commentaries and stories that the Americans don't have a firepower, that they have no ammunition that can sustain for a longer period. This is complete, of course, nonsense. 2 aircraft carriers that are in the area, the Lincoln and the Gerald Ford, and the 7 above surface fleet is enormous armada. It's the biggest since the 2003 war against Iraq. We're talking about more than 20 years. They have all the capabilities and capacity to sustain a long campaign. Of course, the Iranians will retaliate, and I can assume that it's going to be some sort of escalation that will go up and up during the coming days. And of course, the big question is the amount of retaliation that the Iranians can inflict. The weak point, of course, is the Hormuz Strait, 32 kilometers. And if the Iranians decide to block it or to close it or to mine it, that, of course, will mean a severe blow to the economy, as well as themselves, but it will almost force this coalition to escalate the attacks and perhaps even strike civilian infrastructure like oil refineries, the island of Hajj, which is the Iranian biggest oil port. They export 85% of their oil from this tiny island, and so on. I can assume, and I'm saying it, I have to be very careful in what I'm saying, that this campaign will not last for long. It will be decisive strike both by Israel and the Americans, and I can assume that some other European countries will join in on the defensive level. And it's not going to last long. And the aim of this strike is, first of all, to eradicate some of the infrastructure regarding ballistic missiles, nuclear facilities, and also send a very clear signal to the regime: enough is enough. But it's not going to be a long campaign. I think it's going to be a matter of days, maybe 1-2 weeks the most, and then eventually the Iranians will come around to the table with different approach and with different concessions.
Okay, thank you for this. Can you say, perhaps, can you estimate anything as to the division of targets between Israeli jets and American jets? Is Israel more preoccupied with the things that are threatening it right now, like the ballistic missile launchers, and the Americans are more about regime targets, or etc.?
It's very hard to tell if who's going to do what, since it's a combined and joint venture and force. There have been a great joint venture between CENTCOM and the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli IDF. So it's pretty hard to tell who's going to strike what. I can just imagine that Israel will be focusing mainly on the ballistic missiles, because this is our main concern right now. And I'm talking about long-range ballistic missiles, while the Americans will probably try to hit short-range ballistic missiles and infrastructure that threatening their navy or threatening their bases in the area. I mean, up to 500 kilometers missiles, something like that. But we never know, because it's a joint coalition, and everybody can do everything.
Okay, the sirens this morning were in the sense of, hashtag we started, but maybe, I mean, being optimistic, we're both here in Israel. Is there a chance that we will actually not feel a lot, if the campaign is run in a certain way, that we will not feel a lot of, pushback from the Iranians, a lot of rockets coming in, or should we expect like the 12-day war, everyday salvos, etc.? Or is it too soon to tell?
Much less than the 12 days war, simply because of the fact that they haven't yet managed to recover their missiles completely. They were doing the utmost, but mainly the launchers that had been hit hasn't been recovered yet. So we can expect much less of a barrage of attack. Of course, they would try to send some sort of drones and things like that. But remember, we intercepted 99% of the drones that was sent from Iran. They sent about, I think, 1,000 drones, and we intercepted almost all of them except 3 or 4. But other things that we might expect, of course, is some sort of retaliation from the Houthis, more of the same that we have had at the last confrontation, not more than that. And also, there is a possibility that Hezbollah and the proxies of Hezbollah in Lebanon will pay some lip service and send some missiles into Israel, but not on a large scale, being afraid that Israeli retaliation will be harsh, and the Lebanese government also has some role in that area. So I don't think we should expect the immense of amount of missiles that we had seen in April, in October, and in June right now. And let's not forget another thing, that right now, unlike those attacks, it's a joint venture between America and Israel. So it's a powerful, immense, very, very efficient attack on Iranians that will not enable them to reorganize and try to launch some sort of a barrage of missiles like we have seen in previous confrontations.
Okay, and I'm guessing 0 rockets from the Gaza area.
Maybe we will try to do something like send a rocket or something like that, but they simply don't have the capacity for doing that. And Iran is no more involved in what's happening in Gaza. The Gaza people, the Hamas, have a new friend in town, which is Qatar in Turkey. So Iran is no longer in any position to inflict any sort of decision on the Hamas right now.
Mhm. Okay, we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure we'll meet again this week in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.